recorded and be recording, then of course you may turn off your camera if that is more comfortable for you. So you do have that option. Today's presentation is going to be recorded, so please stay muted, and you may choose your video to be on or off depending upon your preference. So before we dive into our conversation today on eating for a healthier heart, we want to just do some overview and give you some resources that are available at Bronson if you need help finding any sort of care or assistance within our Bronson system. The first resource here is our website, bronsonhealth.com, which we have a Find a Doctor feature on our website that helps you find providers either for primary care or specialists that are in your area. You can search by zip code, you can search by specialty, and you can also search by the providers that are accepting new patients if you are in need of a specialist or provider. If you're not comfortable using our website, you can also call our care advisors at phone number 269-341-7788, and they can be of assistance in helping you find the services and connecting you to the services that you might need. We often use MyChart here at Bronson, and one resource that we have if you need any assistance using MyChart, have questions specific to, how to find certain features, maybe it's your bill, maybe it's your lab work, Bronson Health Answers is one resource that we would point you to. Bronson Health Answers is either at the local number or the 1-800 number. Bronson Health Answers doesn't just help with MyChart, however. If you ever have questions about how much a certain procedure or service is going to cost, they can give you a quote on that as well. And then last resource that I want to share with you guys is our Bronson Patient Accounting. So if you need any help with billing or payment plans, those phone numbers are listed there as the last resource. All right, so let's get started. It is February 2nd. Yesterday was the kickoff for the American Heart Month. And we have a few classes this month that are specific to heart health. Today's class, later on this month, we have a class on dining out, keeping in mind heart health. And then we also have a cooking class, so look out for that as well on how to season foods without all of the salt. So we acknowledge American Heart Month for many reasons. American Heart Month allows us the opportunity to bring awareness to the impact that heart disease may have on our lives, gives us the opportunity to recognize the lives that have been lost to heart disease, but it also gives us the opportunity to learn new ways. We're constantly learning, research is constantly evolving, and we want to learn and share that information onto you on how to improve the health of your heart today. Tomorrow is National Wear Red Day. So February 3rd, tomorrow is National Wear Red Day. So help us celebrate, join us in wearing a red shirt or red pants, whatever you feel is comfortable for you to help bring awareness to this important topic. So our objectives today, our goals for today's session is to either learn a balanced approach to eating for heart health, or maybe you already have some insight on how to eat for heart health, and we're just going to reinforce those topics. We're also going to identify which foods are heart healthy and why, what components of those foods make them healthy for our heart. And then we're going to discuss how to use some of those heart healthy foods in different quick meal and snack ideas. And then I'm also going to give you guys some recipe resources so you can continue to look for heart healthy meals. All right, so I want to know from you guys first. So in your chat box at the very bottom of your screen, or again, it might be at the top, I want to hear from you. Type out your answer. What are you currently doing to take care of your heart? And this might be nutrition related and it might not be, but what are you currently doing to take care of your heart? I want to hear your answers in the chat.
We've got a lot coming in: drinking water, exercise, physical activity, eating less dairy, exercising more, watching salt intake, watching sodium, drinking water, following nutrition, exercise every day, exercise and diet, watch what I eat, regular exercise program, lower salt, lots of water, fruits and vegetables, lots of good things coming into the chat.
Yes, lots of fruits and vegetables, exercise, drinking water. I love that. You know, as I was thinking and reflecting back on, oh, good job on the weight loss too, I see there. As I was reflecting back on my presentation, I realized that I don't really address beverages today. So I love that you guys added so much water to the chat conversation so you guys can fill in my gaps. So thank you. And I also love that everybody kind of expanded beyond nutrition, right? I heard physical activity a lot. And so we're gonna, in the next slide here, talk about other areas that impact our heart health as well, above and beyond nutrition. So even though today's conversation is nutrition focused on how we can eat for a healthier heart, it wouldn't be American Heart Month and an accurate representation if we didn't also discuss the many other impact and factors that you know, play into our heart health. And so, you know, first we also want to think about you know, how many hours of sleep, our adequate amount of sleep and quality of sleep that we are getting can impact our heart health. The level of stress, the amount of stress that may be placed on our shoulders, but truly our reaction and how we respond to that stress. How are we relieving that stress in a healthy way? Physical activity got brought up multiple times in the chat, and that's either you know, the lack of physical activity can impact our heart health potentially in a negative way, but physical activity can promote heart health too. And that doesn't just exercise, but physical movement too, you know, walking more, you know, taking the stairs, walking further in the, you know, the back of the parking lot. So physical movement and exercise both can impact the health of our heart. Our smoking habits, either current or past, can impact our heart. How much alcohol we may be taking in, family history and a genetic component. And then I heard some weight loss success in the chat. And so maintaining a healthy weight can also be a positive influence on the health of our heart. So just some other factors that impact as we consider, you know, American Heart Month and all that goes into our health. So when we are talking about heart healthy eating, we're going to start by just painting a broad picture of what that means. So heart healthy eating includes a variety of different food groups. First, we've got our fruits and vegetables. We've got whole grains, low fat or fat-free dairy, lean protein choices, the use of legumes, unsaturated fats, and seasonings that are sodium free. We're going to dive deeper into each of these categories, but that is the overview of a heart healthy diet. So first, we're going to talk about our fruits and vegetables. Our goal for fruits and vegetable intake is 5 servings daily, which is about 2.5 cups of fruits and vegetables. Why? Because fruits and vegetables have a lot of fiber in them. They're also a great water source, and they provide us many vitamins and minerals, phytonutrients, antioxidants that help decrease our risk of disease and decrease our risk of heart disease specifically. The goal with fruits and vegetables is that we are eating the rainbow. We've heard of that before. When we're eating the rainbow, we are looking at including all different colors into our produce options. So I want us to think about all the different colors that we have in our produce options. First, we want to include lots of red produce. That might be cranberries, that might be beets. We've got orange produce like carrots or pumpkin. There's yellow produce like yellow bell peppers, corn, lemons. We've got green produce like green leafy vegetables and avocados and pears. We've got blue produce like blackberries and blueberries. Purple produce like plums, red onion, and red cabbage. And although we may have heard not to eat white foods, white fruits and vegetables are very good sources of nutrients too. And that can be things like cauliflower, mushrooms, or white onions, yellow onions, sweet onions. And so the reason why we want to eat a variety of different colors is so we can really capture all of the different antioxidants and phytonutrients in those types of fruits and vegetables. So that is a challenge that I have for you guys as you are doing your grocery shopping, to try to choose a produce from each color of the rainbow to add to your cart for that week's intake, whether it be part of your meals or your snacks. So how do we choose fruits and vegetables that are going to be heart healthy? Well, fresh, frozen, and canned fruits and vegetables are all really good options, depending upon, our convenience options, our budget, how much time do we have to prepare this meal or snack. And I just want to provide you with some tips. So if you are buying fresh, obviously that is a really good choice. It's unadulterated. There's nothing added like sugar or salt. Fresh is a great option. Frozen is also another great option, being very convenient. It might be budget friendly, depending upon if you're able to catch a sale. But also keep in mind that when these vegetables or fruits are frozen, they are picked at the peak ripeness and they have just as many nutrients as our fresh counterparts. So frozen is a very good option. When we're looking at frozen vegetables, keep in mind that, in order to be a low sodium choice, which we heard in the chat that you guys are really looking at decreasing your salt intake, that's great. Choose whole vegetables without any sauces. That is going to decrease the likelihood that there is going to be any sodium in that packaging. When we are choosing canned goods, canned fruit specifically, we want to look at options that are either fruit canned in 100% juice, because then that is all just natural sugar, very little added sugars. You might just be able to find the light syrup option, and that is acceptable too. It decreases how many added sugars in comparison to heavy syrup. One tip there, you might rinse that, drain it and rinse it to decrease any sugar. And of course, when we're talking about the juice or the syrup, we don't necessarily need to consume that. Just being extra added sugars that are unnecessary. That added sugar, just another side note, when it comes to heart health, can also increase our triglyceride levels. And if you're not familiar with what your triglyceride levels are, of course, talk to your provider to see if they have been tested lately. It can be an indicator of heart health, and added sugars can play a role in that value. When we're looking at canned vegetables, we want to choose canned vegetables with either no added salt or at least be low in sodium. And again, you can drain and rinse those to decrease, again, that salt or sugar component even further. Our next slide just shows some examples of what I'm talking about. And so on the left-hand side, we've got a canned fruit. It's packed in 100% juice. There's no extra, artificial colors or flavors there. We can rinse that juice, of course, still. We don't want to consume that juice. We just want to eat the whole pineapple as the best option. In the center there, we've got mandarin oranges that are no sugar added. Now, everybody's preferences are going to look a little bit different. That's the nice thing about having options. And so with the no sugar added, there is the natural sugar, but then they're going to add a little bit of a sweetener into the liquid in that can. And so if you are trying to stay away from sweeteners or just prefer to not consume any sweeteners, just keep in mind that a no sugar added is going to have a sweetener option. Again, you're going to, rinse that off, drain that, and not consume that. And then on the far right-hand side, we've got canned vegetables with the label of no salt added. And that's just the front labeling. We're going to do some practice on label reading on the back side. You have the actual nutrition facts label, but that's just an overview of some labeling that you can take a look at on the front of the package. All right, so we have dived a little bit deeper into fruits and vegetables and how those are healthy for our heart. We're going to move on now to whole grains. So whole grains, different than refined grains in the sense that whole grains have generally a whole lot more fiber than refined grains. Fiber is very beneficial when it comes to heart health because fiber has been proven to help us decrease our blood cholesterol levels and may also have an impact in lowering our blood pressure as well. So what are whole grains? Whole grains, some examples are whole wheat products, like let's say you're shopping for bread or maybe pasta, then you could look for whole wheat or whole grain labels. Whole oats like old-fashioned oat or steel-cut oats. Brown rice is a whole grain, wild rice, quinoa, barley, popcorn is a whole grain. And so I'm comparing those to the alternative, which would be more of a refined grain. Refined grains are more processed, less nutrients without fortification. So that would be things like just white bread or white pasta, white rice. And I'm not hating on the word white here. They just tend to be more refined, less fiber, less nutrients, unless of course they have been fortified. So whole grains also offer us many different micronutrients like B vitamins and iron and magnesium and zinc. And those can be very helpful in playing a role in forming new cells for our body and carrying oxygen throughout our blood. So next we will take a look at some packaging.
Tina, I'm gonna interrupt for 1 second. Somebody dropped in the chat that black rice, aka forbidden rice, is also very nutritious and tastes delicious. I don't think I've ever heard of that before. Have you?
I have never heard of black rice, no. And I'm not even actually sure if I've ever seen black rice in the store either. So if you want to share a little bit about maybe where you buy it, how you use it, we would love to hear a little bit more about that. Thanks for sharing. All right, so it is tasty, very good. Well, we're all gonna have to look into black rice now. So now when we're looking at whole grains and shopping for whole grain items, our key words are obviously whole and whole grain, right? So here I've just got the front of one package. It is a pasta variety. It's clearly labeled whole grain, giving us some confidence that that is going to have more fiber, more micronutrients for our heart health. On the back, when we are looking at the ingredient list, we see that the first ingredient is whole grain wheat. This is an example of a whole grain cracker, and it just has simple ingredients, otherwise canola oil and some sea salt. So that is how you can do some label reading for whole grains. And now I want to hear from you. I see that we've got a little bit more chatting going on, maybe about the black rice. So thanks for sharing about that. I want to hear what else you guys like when it comes to whole grain. So in the chat, go ahead and answer. What is your favorite whole grain? What is your favorite whole grain? Oats. I love that. Oats are just an easy whole grain, aren't they? Quinoa. I love that somebody said quinoa. Barley. Quinoa is quick. Oh, very good. I like that. Steel cut. Very good. Good variety. Nobody said popcorn. I love popcorn. And I don't think about popcorn as being a whole grain very often. I forget about it, to be honest with you. Yes, Terry. Love popcorn. Good snack. All right, thank you guys for sharing that about whole grains and your favorites, and of course the conversation on black rice. I'm going to have to look at that and find some good recipes there. So our next category of heart healthy foods, we're going to talk about dairy. And so we all know that dairy can be a great source of calcium and vitamin D for, strong bones, especially for children as they're growing. My conversation here in regards to dairy is about the fat content. So the recommendation is 2 to 3 servings of either fat-free or low-fat dairy a day. And that dairy can come from sources such as skim or 1% milk. It can be a low-fat cheese that has 2 grams or less of saturated fat per serving. It could also be like a non-fat yogurt. The goal here in having fat-free or low-fat dairy in our diet is that, one, it has less calories, saturated fat, and cholesterol as the counterparts. 2% and whole milk have more of the saturated fat and cholesterol. Now, if you are, let's say, following more of a vegetarian or vegan eating behaviors, or if you are lactose intolerant, or maybe just personal preference, you don't consume dairy, then there are plant-based options such as soy milk that have a very comparable amount of protein as a cow's milk or a dairy milk. But the tip there is that you would want to choose the unsweetened variety, so not to get that extra added sugars that we were talking about earlier, and making sure that the plant-based milk is fortified. And by fortified, I'll kind of give you an example in the next slide about what I mean there. I think I saw somebody pop up in the chat about coconut yogurts and milks. And I don't have an example for coconut yogurts and milks. Coconuts tend to have a little bit more saturated fat in them. So we'll do some label reading here in a minute, and you can kind of compare your products to see if it might get categorized as a low fat option.
And then someone mentioned about choosing oat milk as well.
So almond milk, rice milk, oat milk, they're all good options as far as a substitute for dairy milk. Nutritionally, just not as comparable as dairy milk. And I say that really very specifically about the protein. So with soy milk and dairy milk, you're usually getting about 7 grams of protein per cup. If we're looking at something like an oat milk or an almond milk, you might only be getting maybe 2 grams of protein. So just not a fair comparison in that way. So as long as you know that and are aware of that, getting protein from another source, then it can be used, depending upon your preferences and intolerances. Thank you guys for asking that question. Okay, so somebody's saying using plant milk and then adding a little bit of protein powder. Absolutely. So as long as you just know that it's just a little lacking in the protein area and able to substitute that in a different way, then that's totally acceptable. So just some examples when we are, again, looking at the front of the packaging for low-fat or fat-free dairy products. On the left-hand side, we've got an example of some cottage cheese. The red containers are usually like 3.5%, 4% milk fat, so higher in saturated fat. This example here is the blue container and from 1% milk fat, so that's going to be less saturated fat. And I don't think I made the comment earlier in distinguishing the different types of fats. We're going to talk about unsaturated fats in a little bit, but we're working here and decreasing our saturated fats, because saturated fats coming from potentially dairy products or fatty cuts of meats coconut oils, they have been linked to increased risk of heart disease, and that's why we're focusing on that here. So 1% milk fat is going to have less saturated fat. In the middle here, I've got an example of some soy milk. It's listed as unsweetened at the very top. And then I just included the micronutrient listing for this soy milk so you can see that it is fortified. It does have vitamin D. It does have calcium to supplement those micronutrients, just to make it a little bit more comparable to dairy milk. And then on the right-hand side, our last example is a Greek yogurt, higher in protein, and it is listed as a non-fat yogurt. It has 0% milk fat, so it is not going to have any saturated fats.
I did want to lift up, somebody had an idea about mixing together no fat or low fat cottage cheese and frozen blueberries and a splash of unsweetened almond milk to use as an ice cream alternative.
Okay. So mixing non-fat cottage, was it non-fat cottage cheese with low-fat cottage cheese?
Yeah, non-fat cottage cheese, blueberries or some other kind of frozen fruit, and then some almond milk, unsweetened almond milk for like an ice cream alternative.
Yeah, very fun. For some reason, a dash of cinnamon keeps coming to my mind as well, and I'm not sure why, but I'm going to try that. Yeah. It sounds like a good breakfast option too, to be honest. Thank you guys for sharing. I love hearing your guys' ideas as well. And you know, that's the benefit of group classes, right? We all get to learn from each other. So thanks for sharing. All right, so our next topic here on heart health is choosing lean proteins. So I already made mention a little bit about saturated fats coming from items like, you know, coconut oil or higher milk fat concentrations. But saturated fat also can come from, you know, fattier cuts of meat. Red meat tends to have more saturated fat. And so the emphasis here is choosing more lean proteins like skinless poultry or fish, or maybe even utilizing more plant-based proteins. The goal here again is simply to decrease our saturated fats while including good sources of protein. So it could be a chicken breast, it could be cod as a lean protein source. Salmon and tuna are good protein sources as well. And they have heart healthy fats called omega-3 fatty acids. And so, you know, the recommendation is, you know, 2 servings of fish per week, fatty cuts of fish like salmon and tuna, very heart healthy. And then some sort of plant-based proteins, they have less saturated fat in them, but another bonus is that while we're getting that protein, lower fat, we're also getting the benefits of extra fiber. And I keep bringing up the word fiber, right? I've said fiber in fruits and vegetables. I've said fiber in whole grains. You know, by choosing more plant-based proteins like garbanzo beans, black beans, kidney beans, nuts, and seeds, we're getting the protein, less saturated fat, and we're getting that extra fiber source as well. So plant-based proteins in those areas can be very heart healthy too. Oh, absolutely. Walnuts. Yep. Walnuts, all the nuts are very heart healthy. Cashews, pecans, walnuts, thanks for sharing that. You know, it doesn't always have to be in the whole form of nut either. We can get lower added sugar, you know, almond butter or peanut butter, and we can still get those heart healthy benefits there too.
And then I did want to lift up one thing. I just missed this in the chat. From your last slide, someone was wondering about telling the silk milk is fortified, how to tell when the silk milk is fortified.
Sure. And Isabella, if you then wanted to go back to that slide where the soy milk is listed, sometimes it will say that it's fortified on the product. Also, I guess I should have made note that with these plant-based milks and being fortified, You do want to shake the item, the plant-based milk carton before use. That fortification can settle to the bottom. And so shaking that to ensure that it is dispersed throughout the milk product before serving it to yourself. But at the very bottom of this slide here, you can see the micronutrients, vitamin D and calcium. You know, those are not very high just naturally. And so by the fact that there is a high presence of vitamin D and calcium in there, we know that it is fortified. So thanks for asking that clarifying question.
And then going with this lean protein side, somebody had an example of baked garbanzo beans with flavorings makes a great snack.
Absolutely. And so if you're not familiar with garbanzo beans, another name for them is chickpeas. And I feel like roasted chickpeas are fairly popular. You can bake them, you can make them in your air fryer, you can buy them already roasted for you and seasoned, an excellent snack. All right, so how do we choose lean proteins? And that's where I said we would do a little practice on the label reading on the back side. So from the front, we can see that, I realize that this picture is a little small, but on the left-hand side here, we've got a picture of some ground beef. And this ground beef in the picture is 80% lean, 20% fat. So 80-20 ground beef. And I am comparing it to a package of ground turkey that is 90% lean and 10% fat. So we know that the ground turkey is going to have less fat because it's only 10% over 20% fat from the ground beef. And then we can also look at the labels to the nutrition facts label. We can see that our serving sizes are the same between the two. And I know I don't have arrows there, but the serving sizes there for each of them are 4 ounces, about the, you know, palm size piece of meat that we're talking about. And then when you take a look at my red arrows, I'm pointing to the area that shows us where the saturated fat amount is. So we can see in the 80-20 ground beef, there is 7 grams of saturated fat in comparison to the ground turkey only having 3 grams of saturated fat. So we can use this nutrition facts label to help us identify which protein source is going to be a little bit more heart healthy by having less saturated fat listed. And all coming with the same amount of protein. You might not be able to see that on the ground turkey. It might be covered up, but the ground beef and the ground turkey both have 19 grams of protein. So you're getting the same amount of protein, but less saturated fat. And because there is less fat, that also means less calories. So Lori asks a good question. And so we will go back to that slide. So cholesterol 80, cholesterol 90, that's not a big difference. So I wouldn't allow that increase of 10 milligrams to sway my decision of choosing ground turkey over ground beef. Very similar. And 60 milligrams of sodium to 90 milligrams of sodium, also not that big of a difference. I'm assuming that the ground turkey has some additional seasonings in it, which is oftentimes the case with turkey and chicken products that are ground up. Because there is less fat, they add a little bit more flavor in the form of seasonings, and so that can increase the sodium a little bit. But that increase by 30 milligrams would also not make me sway my decision of choosing ground turkey over ground beef.
And then someone also said that they are on a restricted sodium diet. How do you balance lower sodium and lower saturated fat items, which sometimes have a higher sodium content?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, it's knowing what is your sodium restriction, right? How many milligrams of sodium has been recommended to you by your doctor? you know, again, I think when balancing and looking at these two things, a 30 milligram difference is not that impactful for the benefit of decreasing your saturated fat quite significantly along with your calories. So again, I just don't think 30 milligrams of sodium is that big of a difference to sway my decision here. Now, if we were talking 60 milligrams of sodium in ground beef and, you know, 200 milligrams in ground turkey, well, if my restriction is, you know, let's say 1800 milligrams a day, then that 200 is pretty significant. I might try to find maybe a different brand of ground turkey that doesn't have as much sodium in it. That is definitely, you know, one option, one alternative is to shop around different brands to see where you can find the lowest sodium. Thanks again for asking good questions, you guys. All right. So we've spoken a little bit about legumes so far as being an excellent source of plant-based proteins, along with an excellent fiber source. They also provide us lots of micronutrients as well, like iron. And I was also going to say something else, but I forgot what it was. So when we're talking about legumes, and let's say you are trying to work towards a more plant-forward eating style, maybe you are looking to choose more plant-based proteins to replace some of your meat options in your meals and snacks, I thought this was a pretty handy tip that 1 cup of beans, lentils, or tofu can replace about 2 ounces equivalent of meat. So 1 cup of beans can replace about 2 ounces of meat to give you the same amount of protein. And so we've talked about garbanzo beans. We've had good tips on roasting those. Black beans, I saw people love those in the chat. You know, kidney beans and chili, those are all pretty common sources of beans. But some other legumes that maybe we don't think about as often, or at least I don't think about as often, are black-eyed peas or split peas are also good plant-based protein sources as well. So how do we choose legumes? You know, they're often coming in either dried or canned varieties. Dried is a very economical choice, very inexpensive to purchase dried. They just require a little bit more time commitment, not as convenient. And so if you're going to be using a dried bean in a recipe, 1 cup dried bean cooks out to be about 3 cups equivalent. So 1 cup dried is about 3 cups cooked. And with those dried beans, you're going to want to soak those in cold water overnight to help with the cooking process when it's ready, to ensure that those beans are cooked, you know, the same through the bean. However, you do not have to soak overnight your lentils and split peas because those are a smaller, thinner legume, so those do not require soaking. If you are buying legumes in a canned variety, just very similar to canned vegetables, right? Choosing no salt added or low sodium options. And if you just can't find those options, and even if you do find those options, you can rinse those off with water, drain them before using to decrease that salt content even further to make it more heart healthy. So now we've got a poll question, our first poll question of the class. And I want to know from you, when you see the poll question pop up on your screen, what is the name of this legume? Is it Great Northern bean? Is it a garbanzo bean chickpea, a pinto bean, or you just have no idea?
Is everybody seeing the poll pop up? I don't see anybody answering, so I'm just curious if everybody saw the poll.
So I see the answers on my end, Isabel.
Oh, perfect.
So,
okay. Sweet.
So far, we've had 25 people. Thank you, Joe. So far, we've had 25 people, 26 people answer the poll. We've got 19% of you voted it's a Great Northern bean. 81% a pinto bean. And the pinto bean wins. That is correct. Nobody said no idea, so kudos to you. And nobody said garbanzo beans. So yes, garbanzo beans are a little bit more distinctive. It was definitely tricky between the Great Northern bean and the pinto bean. So that is the pinto beans. I have a lot of experience with pinto beans. Does anybody want to share how they use pinto beans, their favorite recipes? Either type it in the chat or unmute. Not my favorite bean. Anybody use them? Tacos, Pamela says. Yeah. Chili, okay. Tacos and chili it is. Easy spots to put beans. I love that. That's where I put black beans. Soup, yeah, soup. Okay. Yep. Very good. All right, so we've spent a lot of time so far talking about saturated fats. Saturated fats, obviously, I'm emphasizing to decrease, but there is a type of fat that we also want to increase. Not all fats are bad, right? Unsaturated fat are the healthy versions of a fat. They can help lower our bad cholesterol and therefore decrease our risk of heart disease. Unsaturated fats can come from plant-based oils. It can come from our nuts and seeds, and even, our avocado, which is classified as a vegetable. So, whether we're choosing, let's say, sunflower oil, olive oil, peanut oil, those are good unsaturated fats to cook with. Somebody said, don't forget walnuts. Absolutely not. Those are a great source of unsaturated fat, along with sunflower seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds. And again, it does not have to be in the whole version. A peanut butter and almond butter is also an excellent source of unsaturated fat. And again, avocado oil. Absolutely. My lists are not exclusive. So avocado oil is another good option too. You are correct. Safflower oil, if you've ever used that. These are all good unsaturated fats. Again, they help lower our bad cholesterol or that LDL cholesterol. And so somebody says, I'm going to read that comment real quick. Got to be careful with olive oil. Much of what is sold in the grocery is not good. Get mine from, yep, so fresh pressed olive oil is a good option. That is correct. Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, so when we're looking at labels for unsaturated fats, it can get a little tricky. And so I want to show you guys an example here. On the left-hand side, I've got an example of coconut oil. We can see that the serving size is a tablespoon. We can see that there is 14 grams of total fat. And of those 14 grams of total fat, there is 12 grams coming from saturated fat. So that is a pretty high saturated fat amount. And almost, right, almost all of the amount of fat is coming from saturated fat. We can see underneath the saturated fat that there is 0 grams of trans fat. So we have to just do a little bit of mathematical equations here. So 12 and 0 obviously is 12. That means that the other 2 grams, because there is 14 grams of total fat, that means there's only 2 grams of fat that are coming from unsaturated fat. So 14 grams total, 12 is coming from saturated. That means there's only 2 grams coming from unsaturated fats. And remember, we want to eat more unsaturated than saturated. So now we're going to compare that coconut oil to an olive oil, where we have the same serving size of 1 tablespoon. We can see that the total fat is the same amount, 14 grams. And this is a little tricky here, but if we look a little bit further, see 14 grams, 18%, and then it says sat fat 2 grams. So in comparison to the coconut oil that had 12 grams, this only has 2 grams of saturated fat. So that's good, much lower in saturated fat, which means the other 12 grams is coming from what? Unsaturated fat. So we know, we had to do a little work, a little bit of digging, but we know that from doing that label reading that olive oil is a much more heart healthy choice in comparison to the coconut oil because it has more unsaturated fats.
Tina, did you want to mention how much saturated fat we should be trying to stay under each day for a healthy heart?
Yeah, so I usually do that as a calculation. So like less than 10% of your total calories should come from saturated fat. And I can include that information on the summary sheet as well that will be posted after today's class. So thanks for asking that, Isabel. All right, so our last talking point then here today is on sodium, which you guys have brought up quite a bit. We've talked about sodium and how to decrease our sodium intake from canned items like vegetables and beans. The reason why we're talking about sodium is because if we eat too much, which it says, you know, the average American, the research shows that the average American consumes about like 3,400 milligrams of sodium per day. We can see here that the American Heart Association recommends 1,500 milligrams of sodium a day. So eating too much sodium can increase our risk of high blood pressure and stroke. So eating too much sodium can increase risk of high blood pressure and stroke. And so therefore it's an important part when we're having a heart healthy conversation. So besides salt for seasonings, there are many other sodium-free seasonings that can be used to spice up our foods. Things like onions and garlics and different herbs like cilantro or parsley can be used. And then of course, there's a variety of different sodium-free spices that can be used to spice up our food, such as garlic powder, red pepper flakes, cumin. Mrs. Dash has lots of sodium-free seasonings. They're all sodium-free actually. Italian seasonings, black pepper, these are all sodium-free. In the next slide, I'm going to show you some practicing on label reading for spices as well, because I personally think it can get a little tricky when comparing some.
And then one more person asked in the chat for the previous slide, how much unsaturated fat should you consume daily?
Yes, very good. That's a great question. That's also based upon a percentage. I think it might be easier if I write that out on our summary sheet. So take a look at our summary sheet after the class. It will be posted on the Bronson Eats website. You've got that link in your email, and that summary sheet, I will be very specific on how much saturated fat and unsaturated fat should be eaten in a day. So thank you guys for asking that question. Somebody says, Doug says, Italian seasoning grinder has sea salt in the ingredients. Exactly. And that's a point that I was going to make. So thank you for sharing that. Not all Italian seasonings do. Just like I'm going to give you an example of lemon pepper. Not all lemon pepper has sodium, but some do. And that's why we have to do our label reading. So on the front of the package, when we are looking to see how much sodium is in something, again, we're looking for, no salt added or low sodium, maybe 50% less sodium. Those options are going to have some salts, but they're going to be less than the original item. And then when we're looking at seasonings, we can look for the word sodium free on the front of the package. But in the next slide, we're going to take a look at an example with the label that is very similar from what Doug is talking about in the chat. So here, for example, on the left-hand side, I have got an example of a lemon pepper seasoning. I would have looked at this seasoning and said, lemon, pepper, there's not going to be any salt in that, right? But when we look at our nutrient facts label, we can actually see, and I covered up the serving size. It's probably like a quarter of a teaspoon, maybe a half of a teaspoon, but probably a quarter of a teaspoon, has 210 milligrams of sodium, right? So somebody shared they're on a sodium restricted recommendation from their provider. That would be quite significant for just a small amount of seasoning on your food items in comparison to a lemon pepper seasoning that specifically says salt-free. It is a dash line of seasoning, same serving size of a 1/4 teaspoon, but 0 milligrams of sodium. We get all the flavor without none of the salt.
And then one person said pink Himalayan salt is lower in sodium than sea salt or table salt.
I don't, without looking at the labels, I guess I don't know that. However, what I will say is that salt is salt, right? So if we are looking to decrease our salt intake, maybe for health reasons or just general overall healthiness, it doesn't matter if we're doing the table salt, if it's salt in one of these seasonings, you know, pink Himalayan salt, sea salt, it all is part of our sodium intake and still can impact our health. But thank you guys for asking that question as well. All right, so I want to hear from you guys. What is your favorite sodium-free seasoning? I want to see what you guys like to use in your cooking. What's your favorite sodium-free seasoning? Go ahead and use the chat box and type in your answer. Garlic and onion powder, ground cumin, garlic powder, garlic. Yep. Garlic's a classic, isn't it? Ooh, garlic and ginger. Penzeys spices, yes, they do have some good ones. Cumin and coriander, yep. Basil, great. Yes, those are all sodium free. I love it. I love that we are using lots of salt-free spices already. Spiced paprika, absolutely. And so again, you know, I just don't want you guys to be fooled by any of the seasonings. So just do your due diligence, take a look at the back and just ensure that there is no sodium there. All right, so I realize it's 9:55, so I'm just gonna finish up real quickly here by putting all of this good heart healthy information into some useful tidbits to go home with. Maybe you're already home, but when we're looking at our plate and how to set up that plate, we're looking at splitting up that plate into a few different sections, right? We've got half of the plate, equal amounts whole grains and those lean proteins that we talked about. On the opposite side, we've got half the plate, more vegetables, smaller portion of fruit. We're using those heart healthy fats to, you know, saute our vegetables. Maybe we add a little olive oil to our quinoa recipe or our brown rice. And then of course, water is always the preferred beverage, so we don't get all those extra added sugars from things like juice or soda. And then next, I'm just going to give you guys some quick ideas. This will also be on your summary sheets. And there's no specific recipe. It's just some breakfast, lunch, and dinner ideas on how to incorporate some of the foods that we've talked about that are heart healthy into a full meal. So one of the breakfast ideas here that I have, because you guys love oatmeal, you said, is oatmeal made with water, a splash of your low fat or fat-free milk, or maybe if you're using the almond milk or soy milk instead, some slivered almonds that have got those good unsaturated fats. And then we've got a red fruit and raspberries. Another breakfast option would be a whole grain toast for that fiber, either sliced up or mashed avocado, some white beans on top, and a little bit of black pepper for a breakfast option. We also got the idea of a whole wheat English muffin, some peanut butter, and then yellow produce with the banana. We've got the fat and the protein from that peanut butter. Next, we'll talk about some lunch ideas. So for lunch, a quick lunch idea would be a whole wheat wrap or a whole wheat tortilla with hummus that's made from garbanzo beans, sliced avocado. We've got that red produce and tomato. What other type of bean you like? I've just got black beans here, or maybe you want some chicken breast. Maybe you do half black bean, half chicken breast, and then another red produce on the side with an apple. You can make a mixed green salad, get those green leafy vegetables in. You've got some berries on top. Maybe you've got blackberries or raspberries. Maybe you put tuna for those omega-3 fatty acids, walnuts or pecans, vinaigrette dressing, which is usually made with maybe a safflower oil or an olive oil, so you can get those unsaturated fats. And then the last lunch idea would be like a vegetable and barley soup. There you could do vegetable and garbanzo bean soup with a good garden salad on the side. And then for dinner, one idea would be like a taco salad, right? So you've got your greens as a base, you've got shredded chicken on the top, chicken breast being the leaner choice. Isabel, will you go back one slide for me? I think I had black beans on there because that's usually due with a taco salad, some corn, tomatoes, avocado, salsa for dressing. Be mindful with your salsa. Some of those can be a little bit higher in sodium. Another dinner idea with these heart healthy foods would be a whitefish, maybe using an air fryer or baking it, having a side of that brown rice, or was it the black rice that we talked about today? Roasting your vegetables with olive oil and all your sodium-free seasonings to make a complete meal. And if you are comfortable using QR codes, take out your camera on your phone and scan that QR code for a white bean and quinoa burger recipe. But I will also have that link and recipe on the summary page as well. So white bean and quinoa burger gets your legumes and your whole grains all in one burger.
Hey, Tina, could you try muting yourself and unmuting yourself for a second? For some reason, there's an echo going on. I don't know if anybody else is hearing that. See if that helps.
Okay, I unmuted and muted. And
Uh-oh.
muted. Is it better?
Oh, yeah, okay. I think that sounds a little bit better. Okay, sorry about that. While you were going through the QR code, I'll leave this up for a second while I ask a couple of questions in the chat. Somebody was wondering about the rule of thumb for peanut butter, the type of peanut butter, how much peanut butter you should be using. And then someone also shared a delicious sounding oatmeal recipe with cinnamon, dried cherries, vanilla, and almond extract. And then someone was curious about pine nuts. So I know that was a lot, but.
So rule of thumb for peanut butter, I think that just goes based upon personal preference as well and budget. I mean, you can buy organic, natural peanut butter. You could buy Jif. Just looking for the lower sugar, lower added sugar varieties. 1 to 2 tablespoons. It is a higher, because it has such good fats in them. They tend to be a little bit higher in calories if that is a concern. So maybe a tablespoon over 2 tablespoons, just depending upon what your needs and goals are. But either way, a great source of protein and unsaturated fats. Loved that recipe. That sounded very good that somebody shared. And then pine nuts could absolutely be an option. Pine nuts used on top of a salad would be totally great. Used in a hummus and blended up, that would be a great option too. And then last, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. There's one more question in the chat. They said there seems to be a big debate on eggs. Are eggs okay for your heart health, or should you steer clear?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure how I haven't talked about eggs yet in a heart healthy eating conversation. So general consensus still is about an egg a day is totally acceptable. And even if you really love eggs, 1 egg yolk and, doing 2 or 3 egg whites, depending upon what your appetite is totally acceptable. The American Heart Association endorses eggs as used in a heart healthy diet. And then last here is just some snack ideas and some of the, plant-based protein, high fiber, unsaturated fat choices like popcorn that we've talked about, a low-fat mozzarella string cheese with, whatever fruit of your choice, Nuts and dried fruit sounded very similar maybe to what was shared earlier. We've talked about roasted garbanzo beans, but roasted edamame is something we haven't talked about. That's another great plant-based protein. Apple and peanut butter, veggies and hummus, a low-fat yogurt and berries, tuna salad on whole grain crackers, all very good heart-healthy snack ideas. And then again, here's links or QR codes for your use. Again, I will include this on the summary sheet, but go ahead and scan those now if you would like. 2 resources for recipes. One is from the American Heart Association, has excellent heart healthy recipes. And then eatingwell.com. You can search recipes. This specific QR code or link takes you to the heart healthy specific recipes, but there are many other options on Eating Well too to search just low sodium or high fiber or vegetarian or diabetes friendly. And so there's lots of good information there as well.
And then someone mentioned Jif peanut butter with a no sugar added.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so did we learn a balanced approach to eating for heart health? Did we identify heart healthy foods? Did we discuss how to use those heart healthy foods? I think so. We packed a lot of information into an hour class. I realize we're a few minutes over, so I appreciate you guys staying on if you were able to do so. And I thank you guys all so much for attending. Please look out for our future classes. That I mentioned. We've got that sodium-free cooking class later on in the month, and then we've got a dining out with confidence class later on as well that is going to be focused on heart health. And again, this will be recorded and available on our website, and the summary page for today's class will be posted in the next week or 2 on the Bronson Eats website. So again, I thank you all so much for joining and asking such good questions. Thank you.
And then one last question, if Doug is still on. Doug was wondering about black coffee, light roast or dark roast. Either of them matter for heart health.
Oh, Isabel, you might want to chime in. I always forget. Does dark roast or light roast have more caffeine?
I think
light roast has more caffeine, right?
I think so. I think so, but I could be totally wrong. I don't want to be quoted on that. Let me get the answer for you really quick.
Doug says yes. Are you agreeing? So light roast, I think, has less processing, so there's more caffeine components than the dark roast. I believe it's the American Heart Association stand of 1 cup of caffeine. Again, don't quote me on that off the top of my head. We can always put that information in our follow-up email for you guys too, or I can just address it in our Dine Out with Confidence class. So come to that. All right. Thank you guys all so much. I appreciate you guys. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.